Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here, walking with you in the last book of the New Testament, Revelation chapter 21. We're almost there, all the way to the end, in this great vision of the end of the road. I know I just spoke to that yesterday within my sermon this last weekend, but looking to the New Jerusalem. So maybe I had a little bit of understanding preparing for this daily devotion with that sermon this last week, and keeping our eyes fixed on the New Jerusalem. What does that look like? Well, Revelation chapter 21 gives us the peak of being able to see what does that look like. And here is what it overarching, simplistic, truly looks like. The presence of God with his people. That's what heaven truly is. We speak about that. I speak about that a lot of times. I go into the fourth grade classroom and they do an ask a pastor. They can ask whatever they want of the pastor, and we get into the Word of God, or just have those questions of who God is, what he's done, and what he's doing in me. And there's always that question of being able to say, where is heaven? What does heaven look like? There's this question, there's this thought, there's this intrigue, even in fourth grade, of being able to say, what does heaven look like? And I said, well, here's the reality. We get some of those pictures within the scriptures, but the biggest thing we need to know about heaven isn't the place or the time or what it looks like, is this. It's the presence of God with his people, that he has prepared for us, that he has prepared, that he has actually sent his son to make way for, to be able to say that this is a way of righteousness, this is the way of blessedness, this is the assurance and the promise, this is forever, this is eternity. Presence of God with his people. The New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem. And so when we talk about the New Jerusalem, the holy city of God, we're not talking about the actual city over in Israel. We're talking about people of God in the presence of God. That's what it was all along. Being able to say, when he showed his presence down in the tabernacle, that was a piece of heaven. Presence of God with his people. When he came down into the temple on the Day of Atonement and erased and pushed away the sins of the people, the presence of God with his people. So throughout generations, they've talked about the presence of God with his people, but this is talking about that holy city, the people of God, in his presence. So, the New Jerusalem, verse 1, chapter 21, Revelation chapter 21. Here it is. It says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth." A new heaven and a new earth. And so we want to speak to this really plainly, of being able to understand that a lot of people are saying, hey, what God is going to do at the end times is he's going to take us to heaven. Well, that's not what the scriptures say. Heaven is the presence of God with his people in his good creation. You heard me right. Heaven is going to be on earth, recreated, renewed, as we get to see this. See, it says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth." It's from Isaiah chapter 65, verse 17. From 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 and following, we get to see that God isn't distancing his creation, but rather visiting his creation and bringing it back to that new perfection. "So then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea." You catch that? The sea that was there at the beginning, as we get to see in chapter 4, that was separating John from the throne of God. Well, we get to see that sea, which meant the chaos and the sin that always had that distance from God. There's no longer any sea. Now there's no longer any distance between God and man. There doesn't need to be that distance, because he has brought, the mission has been accomplished. The end times has come, and now we are brought face to face with God in his throne. Nothing prevents us. Nothing separates us. Nothing separates humanity and God anymore. Rather, we are brought close. No longer any sea. "I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God." And how did it look? It was the people, prepared as a bride. This is Ezekiel chapter 16, prophecy fulfilled. Ezekiel 16. prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband, the bridegroom, who is that Jesus. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Now the dwelling of God is with men." No longer, now the dwelling, now the tabernacling, that's actually how you render this word, tabernacling of God is with men. No longer is it a physical dwelling. No longer is it a tabernacle. No longer is it a temple. It is God himself. Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself, not the angels, not even the incarnated Christ, God himself will be with them and be their God. This always churns up some incredible emotions for me, because this, I should have known that I would love Revelation so much, but this was at my wedding. Before the bride, my beautiful bride, walked down the aisle, we had the crucifer come down and had this cross before her, and as it stood right in the middle of the sanctuary, and one of my friends read this verse: God is with men, the beautiful bride, the church, is with her husband. And so we get the picture of what this marriage is going to be about, right? God himself will be their God. So we go forth in our relationships with God, being our God, and there with us. Verse 4, it says, "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." What does this look like? It looks like God being in perfect relationship with man and his wife in the garden, back to perfection. That's what it looks like. That's what the New Jerusalem is. God with his people in his perfection, in how he created, bringing back the new heaven, bringing back the new earth, bringing it back to the original state that he had it in. God with his people, walking with them in the cool of the garden, in relationship with them, no separation, no sin, no chaos, no crying, no pain. Old order of things have passed away. The chaos, the sin, gone. Verse 5, he was seated on the throne. He who was seated on the throne said, here we go, Genesis chapter 1. It brings us all the way back there. And God said, the one who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." And it happens, new creation, from his spoken word. Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." Not according to the last chapters, as we get to see, not deception, not unfaithfulness, not untrue of what Satan and the dragon were all about in these last chapters. No, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. This is what we get to hear from God. He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha, the beginning, and the end. I am the Alpha and the Omega." And some people may not know what that truly is. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, and Omega is the last letter of the alphabet. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. Prophecy fulfilled. Jesus fulfilled. Take a look at John chapter 7 and take verse 37, and take a look at John chapter 4, verse 10, as he's visiting that Samaritan woman. If you only knew the water that I was giving to you, right? The spring of the water of life. He who overcomes, and this is only by the Spirit alone, we learned that in the last chapters, he who overcomes by the Spirit will inherit all of this, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. And inherit everything, right? It says inherit all this. We're going to be heirs of the throne. You'll be my son. Yeah, the Son of God is Jesus Christ. But for those who overcome, which is only by the Spirit, and actually through the life of Christ, you will be an heir of the throne. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, the ones who are not of Christ, not doing the fruit of the Spirit, not living in the fruit of the Spirit, not called by that gospel, right, but actually on the opposite side, unbelieving, are cowardly and idolaters, those who do not worship God alone, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. And this is the second death. Remember how we talked out before, being able to say we all are a part of that first death, of being able to say in our baptisms drowned in our sin, but that first resurrection brought to life. We also have that second resurrection that we'll have eternity with God. But here that second death doesn't touch those who believe, because the second death is that eternal death, eternal damnation. Those without Christ, those distant from God, separated from God, unbelieving. But not so with you, brothers and sisters, believers in Jesus Christ, resurrected in the new creation with God. God himself will be with them. He will be their God, and they will be his people. Eternity, written by God, spoken by God in this new heaven and new earth. Being able to have that relationship with God for all eternity. Face-to-face worship and beautiful work in and amongst his new creation with the people of God. Brothers and sisters, be encouraged this day that God is with us. Emmanuel, yes, from that Christmas time, but also from all the way through eternity. God himself is your God, and he is with you always. Have a blessed day.